Ladies, let's talk honestly today. Not politely, not comfortably, honestly. Because there is a truth about single older men that many women don't want to hear, and avoiding this truth has cost too many good women their time, their energy, and sometimes their self-respect. Here's the first truth. A single older man is not unfinished business. He is finished business. By the time a man reaches a certain age, he knows exactly who he is, what he wants, and more importantly, what he is not willing to change. He is not still figuring it out. He has figured it out. The mistake women make is assuming time will soften him, love will reshape him, or patience will transform him. It won't. What you see is what you get, and what you get is what he has chosen to be. A single older man is usually settled in his ways, and this is one of the hardest truths for many women to accept, because hope often feels more powerful than reality. By the time a man reaches a certain age and remains single, his lifestyle is no longer accidental. It is intentional. His routines are established, his preferences are fixed, and his tolerance for disruption is low. He wakes up the way he wants, eats what he likes, spends his free time how he chooses, and structures his life around comfort and control. This does not happen overnight. It is the result of years of living independently and learning how to arrange life so it works best for him. Women often believe that love has the power to soften a man's habits or inspire growth. But change requires desire, not pressure. An older man who is content with his life rarely feels motivated to reshape it, unless he personally sees a benefit greater than the comfort he already enjoys. When a woman enters his world expecting compromise, flexibility, and adjustment, she may slowly realize that she is the only one bending. He may listen, nod, and even agree in words, but his actions quietly return to what feels familiar and safe to him. Another important part of this truth is that settled behavior is not always loud or obvious. It can appear calm, mature, and confident. He may say he is open to love, but openness without movement is just a concept. He may claim he is willing to change for the right woman, but the right woman in his mind often fits into his life rather than reshapes it. This creates a silent imbalance where the woman is constantly adapting while the man remains unchanged, convinced that stability is the same as effort. Many women mistake consistency for commitment. An older man may be consistent in communication, reliable in presence, and predictable in routine, yet still resistant to growth. Consistency simply means he is comfortable doing what he has always done. Commitment requires evolution, sacrifice, and shared decision-making. A man settled in his ways may struggle with emotional flexibility, finding it difficult to prioritize someone else's needs when they conflict with his own habits. There is also the issue of identity. Older men often define themselves by the life they have built alone. Their independence becomes a source of pride. Changing feels like losing a part of themselves rather than gaining something new. When a woman suggests adjustments, he may perceive it as criticism instead of collaboration. Over time, this can lead to emotional distance, where he protects his lifestyle more fiercely than the relationship. Women sometimes believe patience will unlock change. But patience only works when there is willingness on both sides. Waiting for a man to outgrow habits he has lived with for decades often leads to quiet disappointment. The longer a pattern exists, the deeper it becomes rooted. Expecting a fundamental shift without clear, consistent action is unrealistic, no matter how strong the emotional connection feels. This truth is uncomfortable because it forces women to evaluate reality instead of potential. It challenges the belief that love alone can transform someone who has already decided how they want to live. A man settled in his ways is not necessarily wrong or flawed. He is simply aligned with himself. The problem arises when a woman assumes alignment with her will come naturally without evidence. Understanding this keynote is not about judgment. It is about awareness. When a woman recognizes that an older man's habits are choices rather than temporary phases, she gains clarity. Clarity prevents resentment. It allows her to decide whether his life truly has room for her needs, her growth, and her vision of partnership. Accepting this truth early protects emotional energy and prevents the slow erosion of self-worth that comes from trying to change someone who never intended to change in the first place. For many single older men, freedom is not just a phase of life. It is the reward they have structured their entire existence around. After years of responsibilities, relationships, compromises, and sometimes disappointments, freedom becomes sacred. It means waking up without obligation, making decisions without consultation, and living without emotional accountability to another person. When a man reaches an older age and remains single, that freedom often holds more value to him than the idea of emotional commitment, even if he never says it directly. Women often misunderstand this because freedom does not look selfish on the surface. It can look calm, stable, and self-sufficient. He pays his bills, manages his time well, and appears emotionally composed. From the outside, it seems like the perfect foundation for a relationship. But what is often missed is that his independence is not neutral, it is protected. He has designed his life in a way that minimizes disruption. Emotional commitment, by its nature, introduces disruption. It requires compromise, emotional labor, and shared decision-making, all of which challenge the control he has grown accustomed to. Many older men enjoy companionship without responsibility. They like conversation, intimacy, laughter, and presence, but only within boundaries that do not threaten their autonomy. This creates confusion for women because the man shows interest, consistency, and even affection. Yet, when the relationship begins to require deeper emotional investment, clearer definitions, or future planning, resistance quietly appears. He may pull back, delay conversations, or dismiss concerns by saying he prefers to take things slowly. What he often means is that he prefers things to remain easy. Freedom becomes especially important when a man has learned to regulate his emotions alone. He has developed coping mechanisms that do not involve sharing vulnerability. Emotional commitment requires openness, accountability, and the willingness to be affected by another person's feelings. For a man who has lived independently for a long time, this can feel exhausting rather than fulfilling. Instead of seeing partnership as support, he may see it as emotional weight. Women sometimes assume that offering love, patience, and understanding will naturally inspire commitment. But commitment is not born from comfort alone. It is born from intention. If a man values freedom more than emotional depth, no amount of affection will shift that priority. He may enjoy the relationship as long as it fits neatly into his life, but the moment it requires adjustment, he will protect his independence first. Another difficult truth is that some older men equate commitment with loss of time, loss of control, loss of peace. Even if they desire connection, the fear of losing autonomy outweighs the desire to build something shared. This internal conflict causes mixed signals. One day he is present and warm. The next he is distant and unavailable. Not because he is confused, but because he is guarding his freedom. Women often personalize this behavior, believing they are asking for too much or doing something wrong. In reality, they are asking the wrong man for something he is unwilling to give. Emotional commitment requires space in a man's life and heart. A man who prioritizes freedom has filled that space with himself. This keynote is painful because it forces women to distinguish between attention and intention. Attention can exist without commitment. Time together does not automatically mean a shared future. When freedom is the priority, commitment becomes optional, conditional, and delayed. Understanding this truth allows women to stop negotiating for emotional presence. It helps them see that love should not feel like an intrusion into someone's life. A man who truly desires commitment does not feel threatened by emotional closeness. He makes room for it. A man who values freedom above all else expects others to fit into his life without changing it. Many women assume that age automatically brings emotional maturity, but this belief often leads to disappointment when reality does not match expectation. Emotional maturity is not a natural result of getting older. It is the result of self-awareness, accountability, and the willingness to grow. A man can accumulate years, experiences, and even success, yet still struggle with emotional regulation, communication, and vulnerability. Time alone does not teach these skills. Intentional effort does. Older men often become skilled at managing life on the surface. They learn how to function efficiently, handle responsibilities, and maintain control over their environment. This external competence can easily be mistaken for internal emotional strength. A man who appears calm and confident may still avoid difficult conversations, shut down when confronted, or deflect accountability. These behaviors are not signs of immaturity in age, but they are signs of emotional underdevelopment. Many emotionally immature patterns become more refined with time rather than corrected. An older man may no longer explode in anger, but instead withdraws in silence. He may not argue openly, but he avoids addressing issues altogether. This creates an illusion of peace, while problems quietly remain unresolved. Women often interpret this as emotional stability, when in reality, it is emotional avoidance. Another challenge is that older men have had more time to normalize their emotional habits. If a man has spent decades avoiding vulnerability, he may see emotional openness as unnecessary or uncomfortable. He may believe that providing, showing up physically, or maintaining consistency is enough. Emotional intimacy, however, requires expression, empathy, and responsiveness. Without these, a relationship lacks depth, no matter how long it lasts. Women also assume that past relationships taught a man valuable lessons. While this can be true, it is not guaranteed. Some men leave relationships blaming circumstances, partners, or timing, rather than examining their own role. Without reflection, patterns repeat. Age then becomes a shield rather than a source of wisdom. The man believes his experience validates his behavior instead of questioning it. Emotionally mature men are able to sit with discomfort. They listen without defensiveness, acknowledge mistakes without excuses, and communicate needs clearly. An older man who lacks these skills may rely on authority, logic, or silence to maintain control. He may dismiss emotional concerns as overreactions or unnecessary drama. This creates an environment where a woman feels unheard and minimized, even when the man believes he is being reasonable. Another overlooked aspect is emotional flexibility. Life requires adaptation, especially in relationships. An emotionally mature man understands that compromise does not threaten his identity. An emotionally immature older man may view compromise as loss. He resists change not because he cannot understand it, but because he does not want to be inconvenienced emotionally. Women sometimes try to teach emotional maturity through patience and explanation. They soften their needs, rephrase their feelings, and lower expectations, hoping understanding will grow over time. This rarely works because emotional maturity cannot be taught by a partner. It must be chosen by the individual. Without that choice, the emotional gap remains, no matter how much effort is invested. The danger of assuming emotional maturity is that it delays clarity. Women stay longer than they should, waiting for depth that never arrives. They confuse calmness with capacity, experience with growth, and age with readiness. When emotional maturity is missing, the relationship feels stable but empty, consistent but disconnected. Recognizing that age and emotional maturity are separate allows women to assess relationships based on behavior rather than assumptions. It shifts focus from potential to reality. Emotional maturity reveals itself through actions, not years. A man's age may suggest experience, but only his emotional presence confirms readiness for a meaningful connection. Many older men carry a past love that never truly left them, even if the relationship itself ended long ago. This is one of the most difficult realities for women to recognize because it is rare. Spoken aloud, the man may insist he has moved on, and in practical ways, he often has. He works, dates, laughs, and functions normally. But emotionally, a certain chapter remains unfinished. That past relationship becomes a reference point that quietly shapes how he views every new woman who enters his life. This comparison is not always conscious. It lives in memory, routine, and emotional habit. He remembers how things felt when love was easy, when expectations were familiar, and when efforts seemed natural. Over time, the memory becomes idealized. The conflicts fade, but the comfort remains. When a new woman appears with different needs, rhythms, or emotional language, he measures her against something that no longer exists in reality, but feels real to him internally. Women often sense this comparison without being able to name it. They feel like they are competing with a shadow, no matter how understanding, supportive, or patient they are. Something feels out of reach. The man may enjoy her presence, but never fully invest emotionally. He keeps a certain distance, protecting the emotional territory reserved for the past. This leaves the woman questioning her worth, believing she needs to try harder to earn a depth that is being withheld. Some older men stay emotionally loyal to a former partner, even while being physically single. This loyalty is not romantic in the traditional sense. It is emotional familiarity. The past relationship shaped him, and instead of releasing it, he uses it as a standard. This prevents genuine openness because true connection requires space. When the heart is already occupied by memory, there is little room for something new to grow. The comparison becomes especially damaging when the man is unaware of it. He may genuinely believe that something is missing in the current relationship without realizing that what he is missing belongs to another time and another person. He may say he feels unsure, disconnected, or not fully convinced. These feelings are not always about the woman in front of him, but about unresolved attachment behind him. Women often respond by overgiving. They become more accommodating, more understanding, more patient, hoping to surpass a comparison they cannot see. This leads to emotional exhaustion. The relationship becomes one-sided, with the woman investing deeply while the man remains emotionally cautious. The imbalance grows quietly, creating frustration and self-doubt. Another painful aspect of this keynote is that comparison prevents appreciation. When a man is focused on what once was, he struggles to fully see what is. He overlooks the unique qualities of the woman in his present life because his emotional lens is clouded by nostalgia. This does not mean the current woman lacks value. It means the man has not done the internal work required to release the past. Some older men avoid confronting this truth because it forces vulnerability. Letting go of a past love means accepting loss, regret, or unfinished emotion. Holding on to comparison feels safer than grieving what ended. But safety comes at a cost. It limits emotional availability and prevents genuine intimacy. Women deserve to be chosen for who they are, not evaluated against someone who no longer exists in the present. When a man consistently compares, even silently, he is not fully available. Love cannot thrive in competition with memory. Emotional presence requires closure, and closure requires honesty with oneself. Understanding this truth helps women stop internalizing emotional distance as personal failure. It clarifies that sometimes the obstacle is not compatibility, effort, or timing, but unresolved attachment. When a man has not released the past, no amount of love in the present can fully reach him. Stability often looks like safety, especially to women who have experienced chaos, inconsistency, or emotional uncertainty in past relationships. When an older man has a steady career, a home, routines, and a predictable lifestyle, it creates a sense of relief. It feels grounding. It feels mature. It feels like the opposite of risk. But stability on the outside does not automatically translate to emotional availability on the inside, and confusing the two can lead to deep emotional disappointment. An emotionally unavailable man can be very stable. He can show up on time, pay bills, keep promises related to logistics, and maintain structure in his life. These qualities are valuable, but they are not emotional connection. Emotional availability requires openness, responsiveness, and the ability to engage with another person's inner world. A stable man may provide consistency without presence, reliability without intimacy, and order without warmth. Many women assume that once a man's life is settled, his heart is ready. In reality, some men use stability as a shield. Their routines protect them from emotional exposure. They know how to manage life efficiently without letting anyone get too close. This kind of stability is self-contained. It does not invite emotional partnership. It simply tolerates companionship as long as it does not disrupt the system. Emotional availability requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels risky to someone who has learned to control his world. An older man may have experienced emotional pain in the past and responded by building a life that minimizes emotional dependence. He becomes dependable but distant. He offers security without surrender. To a woman, this can feel confusing because nothing appears wrong on the surface, yet something essential is missing. Another issue is that emotionally unavailable men often substitute provision for connection. They believe that being present physically or materially is enough. They may struggle to express feelings, validate emotions, or engage in emotionally difficult conversation. When a woman tries to discuss emotional needs, he may listen politely but fail to respond with depth. He might offer solutions instead of empathy or retreat into silence when emotions become uncomfortable. Stability can also mask emotional rigidity. A man who has built a stable life may resist emotional change because his system works for him. Emotional availability requires adaptability, the ability to adjust habits, priorities, and emotional responses for the sake of connection. A man who values order over intimacy may see emotional needs as disruptions rather than opportunities for closeness. Women often internalize this lack of emotional availability. They assume they are asking for too much or being overly sensitive because the man appears to be doing everything right. He is not abusive. He is not unreliable. He is not chaotic, yet the relationship feels lonely. Emotional neglect is difficult to identify because it lacks dramatic conflict. It is quiet. It is subtle. It is the absence of depth rather than the presence of harm. Over time, this dynamic creates emotional imbalance. The woman becomes the emotional carrier of the relationship, initiating conversations, expressing feelings, and maintaining connection. The man remains emotionally passive, offering stability but not engagement. This imbalance leads to exhaustion and self-doubt, even though the relationship appears healthy from the outside. Understanding that stability does not equal emotional availability helps women evaluate relationships more honestly. It shifts the focus from appearances to experience. Safety in a relationship is not just about predictability, it is about emotional responsiveness. A man can offer a stable life and still be emotionally unreachable when emotional availability is missing. Love becomes one-sided, no matter how stable the foundation seems. True partnership requires more than structure. It requires emotional presence, willingness, and connection that goes beyond routine and responsibility. Many older men carry a past love that quietly shapes how they view every new woman who enters their life. This past relationship may have been a marriage, a long-term partner, or someone they believed was the one. Even if the relationship ended years ago, the emotional imprint often remains. What women do not see is that comparison becomes automatic. Every new connection is measured against memories that are frozen in time, not against reality. The past is remembered selectively, often stripped of conflict and idealized as something that cannot be replicated. This creates an invisible competition that no woman can win. She is not being compared to a real person anymore, but to a memory that has been edited by time and emotion. When an older man feels disappointed or disconnected in a new relationship, he may not understand why. He simply feels that something is missing. That missing feeling is often the emotional familiarity of a past bond, not a flaw in the present woman. Women sense this comparison without it being spoken. They feel held at a distance, emotionally measured, but never fully embraced. No matter how much effort they give, something feels out of reach. The man may hesitate to deepen the relationship, delay commitment, or keep emotional walls intact. He may say he needs more time, but time does not heal a comparison that was never released. Some older men remain emotionally loyal to a woman who is no longer in their life. This loyalty is not about love as much as it is about identity. That past relationship represents a version of himself he no longer recognizes. Letting go of that memory would mean accepting change, loss, and emotional vulnerability. Holding on feels safer than opening up again. Women often believe they can replace the past by being better, more understanding, or more patient. This effort slowly turns into self-abandonment. They adjust themselves to fit an emotional space that was never empty to begin with. When a man has not emotionally closed a previous chapter, he cannot fully open a new one. Some men do not consciously realize they are comparing. They simply feel unsatisfied without knowing why. Others are aware but unwilling to confront it. Facing unresolved attachment requires emotional honesty, something many older men have avoided for years. Instead, they stay half-present, enjoying companionship while keeping emotional distance. This dynamic leaves women questioning their worth. They wonder why they are not enough, unaware that the issue has nothing to do with them. The problem is not competition. It is emotional availability. A man cannot love fully in the present when he is still emotionally living in the past. Understanding this truth saves women from chasing validation that was never theirs to earn. When a man consistently looks backward, he cannot move forward, and no amount of love from a new woman can replace something he refuses to release. Stability is often mistaken for emotional safety, especially when it comes to older men. A man who has a steady income, a home, and a predictable routine appears secure and dependable. Women are naturally drawn to this sense of order, believing it signals readiness for a healthy relationship. But emotional safety requires more than external stability. It requires emotional consistency, openness, and presence which are not guaranteed by a settled life. An older man may provide comfort without connection. He may be physically present but emotionally distant. He shows up on time, keeps his promises, and maintains structure, yet avoids emotional depth. When conversations move toward feelings, needs, or vulnerability, he redirects, minimizes, or shuts down. This creates a relationship that feels calm on the surface, but empty underneath. Many women confuse peace with fulfillment. A stable man may not bring chaos, but he may also not bring intimacy. Emotional availability means being responsive, empathetic, and engaged. It means allowing another person access to your inner world. Without this, stability becomes a shell rather than a foundation. Older men who have lived alone for a long time often become emotionally self-contained. They rely on routine rather than connection to regulate their emotions. This makes them less reactive, but also less expressive. When a woman seeks emotional reassurance, she may be met with logic instead of empathy. Her feelings are treated as problems to be solved rather than experiences to be understood. This imbalance slowly affects a woman's sense of self. She begins to suppress her emotions to keep the peace. She avoids bringing up concerns because she does not want to disturb the stability she values. Over time, she feels unseen, unheard, and emotionally lonely despite being in a relationship. Stability without emotional availability creates a false sense of security. The relationship does not feel unsafe, but it also does not feel nourishing. Love becomes functional rather than meaningful. The man believes he is doing his part by being reliable, while the woman longs for emotional connection that never arrives. Some older men believe emotional expression is unnecessary because life is already under control. They mistake emotional restraint for strength. In reality, emotional availability is not weakness. It is engagement. It requires effort, curiosity, and the willingness to be affected by another person. Women often stay in these relationships longer than they should because nothing is technically wrong. There is no betrayal, no drama, no obvious neglect. But the absence of emotional intimacy slowly erodes satisfaction. Love should not feel like something you endure quietly. Recognizing this truth allows women to redefine safety. True safety includes emotional responsiveness, not just reliability. A stable life can exist without emotional connection, but a fulfilling relationship cannot. When emotional availability is missing, stability becomes a comfort zone that prevents deeper love rather than supporting it a man. Relationship history is often dismissed as coincidence, bad luck, or timing, but in reality, it reveals consistent patterns. Older men have lived long enough to show who they are in relationships. The way past connections ended, the reasons given, and the recurring themes all point to behavioral truths. These patterns are not accidents. They are choices repeated over time. Women often ignore this because they want to believe they are different. They believe their love, patience, or understanding will inspire change. While hope is powerful, it does not erase patterns. A man who avoids commitment repeatedly is not suddenly cautious. He is consistent. A man whose relationships end because partners felt emotionally neglected is not misunderstood. He is predictable. Patterns show how a man handles conflict, responsibility, and intimacy. If every relationship ended with the woman feeling unheard, that is information. If every partner wanted more than he was willing to give, that is information. If he speaks about all exes as problems, that is information. These are not isolated stories. They are evidence. Older men often frame their past in a way that protects their self-image. They blame timing, circumstances, or incompatible partners rather than examining their role. Without self-reflection, growth does not occur. Time passes, but behavior remains the same. Women who ignore this find themselves living out the same ending as the women before them. History also shows emotional capacity. A man who has never maintained a long-term emotionally healthy relationship may struggle to build one now. This does not mean he is incapable of love, but it does mean effort and intention are required. Without those, the pattern continues. Women sometimes avoid asking questions about the past because they fear judgment or conflict, but the past speaks even when questions are not asked. It shows up in behavior, avoidance, and emotional limits. When actions align with history, belief should follow. Understanding patterns empowers women to make informed choices. It shifts focus from hope to reality. Love is not about changing someone's history. It is about choosing someone whose history aligns with your future. When women stop romanticizing patterns and start respecting them, they protect their time, energy, and emotional health. A man's past is not a warning to fear, but it is a message to listen to. Patterns do not lie, and ignoring them does not make them disappear.